In a small town called Zola, there lived a little girl named Rose. She was just 6 years old and lived with her parents, Mr. John and her mother, Juliet. Rose was a very beautiful girl who had a lovely smile, but unfortunately, she never got to smile because she was not happy in her own parents' home. It all began one day when Rose was in her room and her father, Mr. John, walked in. He said to her, "Rose, I want to show you how babies are made, but you must not tell anybody. It is a secret. Make sure you don't tell anyone." Little Rose did not know what her father meant, but she trusted him. After all, he was her father, and she believed everything he said. Mr. John then started having intimacy with his 6-year-old daughter. He forced himself on the little girl and she will always cry, shouting, "Daddy, please stop. Daddy, it's paining me. Daddy, it's scary." But Mr. John would not listen. Rose didn't understand what was happening, she only felt a sharp pain that frightened her. She would try to run away, but Mr. John would always catch her. At 6 years old, Rose was deeply traumatized. You must be wondering where her mother was while all this was going on. Stick with me on this story. And please, if you are watching this story and haven't subscribed, make sure to subscribe to my channel. And if you are a returning subscriber, I love and cherish you. Now, let's go back to our story. Mrs. Juliet owned a very big shop in the city, the biggest perfume shop in Lagos, where everyone came to buy at wholesale prices. She was always at her shop, so busy with her business that she never cared to know what was happening in her home. Mr. John, on the other hand, was a man who worked from home, building websites for companies, so he had the time to do whatever he wanted because he was always home alone with his daughter. One day, Mrs. Juliet was sitting at the dining table, counting money as usual, that was all she cared about. Rose walked up to her and said, "Mommy, why does Daddy hurt me when you are not around?" Rose's voice was small and trembling, but her mother didn't even look up from the pile of papers spread across the table. Juliet was a very busy businesswoman, always focused on her shop and money, and nothing else seemed to matter. "Rose, please, not now," she replied, flipping through her ledger, her attention fixed on the numbers. "Can't you see that I'm busy? You know how hard I work to make sure we have enough. Just go and do your homework." "But, Mom," Rose said again, her voice cracking as she stood there, clutching the hem of her shirt, desperate for someone to listen to her. "Rose, I said I am busy." Juliet snapped, finally looking up, her eyes flashing with anger. "You always bring up silly things when I'm trying to work. Go to your room." Rose swallowed hard, her words dying in her throat. She wanted to scream, to beg her mother to hear her, but she knew it was pointless. Her mother never listened, never seemed to care about anything but the shop. So Rose turned quietly and went to her room, her heart heavy with a secret she was forced to carry alone. Mr. John continued to sneak into her room every night, and whenever Madame Juliet went to the shop, he would always have his way with his daughter. He would always tell Rose to keep it a secret, saying he was only trying to make her feel like a real woman. Rose would always say, "Daddy, but it is always painful. I don't like it. I'm going to tell Mommy." And her father would shout at her, "If you tell anybody, you will die." Out of fear, innocent Rose kept it to herself, but deep down, she needed someone to talk to. She needed attention, she needed someone to express her pain and feelings to. She wanted to talk to her mother, but her mother never gave her a listening ear. It was as if she was all alone in the world. Her father, who was supposed to be protecting her, was the one causing her pain, and her mother, who was supposed to be her guardian angel, was never available for her. One evening, Rose was sitting on the staircase, crying, her eyes swollen. She had gone to her mother again, hoping, praying that this time she would listen, but it ended like all the other times. "Mom, can I talk to you?" "It's about Daddy," Rose had whispered, her hands trembling as she gripped the edge of the table where Juliet was counting her money. Juliet didn't even look up. "What is it now, Rose?" You are always complaining about something. Rose's heart pounded in her chest. It's about what Daddy does when you're not home. She couldn't bring herself to say it, the words felt like they would burn her throat. Rose, I don't have time for this, her mother said sharply, slamming the pile of cash down on the table. You're always making up stories. Daddy works hard to take care of us, and you're just trying to cause trouble, you little witch. But Mum, please, Rose's voice broke, tears streaming down her face as she begged her mother to listen. If you're not happy here, maybe you should go live somewhere else. Stop being so dramatic, you're just trying to get attention. Rose was stunned into silence. She felt the walls of her world closing in on her. No matter how hard she tried, her mother always shut her down. No matter how much she cried, Juliet never believed her. The one person who was supposed to protect her couldn't even see her pain. The next morning, Rose sat at the breakfast table, her eyes dull and lifeless. Juliet was already dressed for the day, her bag packed with order slips and money. Make sure you behave yourself today, Juliet said, kissing the top of Rose's head absently, not even noticing the tears brimming in her daughter's eyes. I have to meet an important client. As soon as Juliet left the house, Mr. John's mood changed. He smiled at Rose in a way that made her skin crawl. The man was a monster hiding in plain sight. Months went by, and the same pattern continued. Rose tried to tell her mother again and again, but she was too consumed by her business. She always dismissed Rose's cries for help, calling her dramatic or too sensitive. Every time Rose tried to speak up, her mother would say things like, "Don't you see how hard I'm working? You're lucky to have a roof over your head. Stop making up stories." Rose gave up after a while. She stopped trying to talk to her mother, stopped hoping that anyone would save her. She retreated into herself, becoming quieter, her laughter fading into silence. One day, Juliet finally caught a glimpse of the truth. She returned home early from work, something she never did, and found Mr. John in Rose's room, doing the very thing Rose had tried to warn her about. She saw her husband John hurting her 6-year-old daughter. Juliet's world crumbled in an instant. She screamed, pushing Mr. John away and carrying Rose in her arms. For the first time, she realized what her daughter had been trying to tell her all along. Juliet called the police, and Mr. John was taken away. In his defense, he said Juliet was never available for him, that she was always busy with her business, and he needed companionship and company. Rose was taken for counseling, where she slowly began to heal from the trauma she had endured for so long. Juliet, wrecked with guilt, quit her job and dedicated herself to rebuilding her relationship with her daughter. She had learned the hard way that money and business couldn't replace the love and care a child needs. As for Mr. John, he was sentenced to life in prison and spent the rest of his life in jail. This story teaches us to always listen to those who come to you with their pain, especially children. Ignoring their cries for help can lead to more suffering. You never know what they might be trying to tell you. No amount of money or success is worth losing the ones you love. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I hope you learned a lesson, to be a good parent, a listening parent, not a mother like Juliet and not a father like Mr. John. Please, if you haven't subscribed yet, I'd love for you to join me on this journey. Click the subscribe button, and don't forget to turn on notifications so you'll be the first to see new short stories like this one. I truly appreciate your support. And if you're still here listening, it means you watched the story to the very end, and you're the real motivation behind my work. Thank you so much, I don't take your support for granted. See you in my next video. Bye bye.